to drop down, but when I get the presentation, I'll forward.
Thank you.
And just let me know if I need to share. That's fine too.
The floor is yours, Tony.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tony Danziger. I'm the president-elect of the Hudson Gateway Association of Realtors and the co-chair of our award-winning Global Business Council. The mission of our Global Business Council is to provide our members with tools and resources to connect globally with real estate professionals from around the world. We do this by collaborating with NAR, FIAPSI, with realtor associations across the USA and around the world, by promoting CIPS, spearheading our annual Global Real Estate Summit, creating networking opportunities, organizing and promoting local and international trade missions, and by educating our members through this Global Business Chat series, which is now in its 4th year. For those unfamiliar with the Global Business Chat, we do not discuss properties for sale or new developments or real estate market dynamics. Our goal is to educate our viewers on the anatomy of the real estate transaction in the country we're featuring. We discuss the nuts and bolts of the real estate transaction from start to finish. So that means referring your clients to reputable local real estate professionals, initiating the property search, making the offer, due diligence, financing, closing costs, legal and tax issues to consider, and investment incentive programs such as golden visas. So basically, things that you normally deal with at home with your local real estate transaction. Our goal is not to encourage you to represent a client in a jurisdiction in which you're not licensed or familiar with. We provide you with information to help you intelligently guide your client in the right direction when they're looking to make a real estate investment in a foreign country. Today, we're going to explore the anatomy of a real estate transaction in Ecuador, one of South America's booming real estate markets. Joining us are 2 of Ecuador's leading real estate professionals who were both recently featured in the New York Times. Zach Cashero is the Chief Technology Officer of Propertyshelf, and he is also the President of MLS Ecuador. Ashley Rogers is a top sales agent with Ecuador at your service in Cuenca, Ecuador. Welcome, Zach and Ashley. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for
Thanks for
having
having
us.
us.
Great. So tell us a little bit about yourselves before we start with the program. Zach, if you want to start with your little personal bio.
Sure. Yeah. So on the personal side, I have a background in technology. I got my master's in computer science and focused on machine learning. So I really got, came from the technology side, but then I personally fell in love with Latin America. Traveling around, I got to know most of the countries in South America, and got to know Ecuador just by traveling through it and seeing all of its beautiful wonders that it has to offer. And then I crossed paths with Propertyshelf MLS team and the founder, and I basically started working with them up in Costa Rica, and we have the MLS up there in Costa Rica as well. So I was living and working in Costa Rica, also another paradise, and then just kept on gaining more responsibility, moving up the ladder, as they say, and eventually worked to become the CTO of Propertyshelf, sort of just guiding our own in-house MLS solution. And then I moved back here to Ecuador, really just because I loved it and fell in love with Cuenca especially. And then as I was here and with my partner who had started MLS Ecuador, I also took over the business side of things here in MLS Ecuador. So I really I work hard to understand the full spectrum. I'm definitely focused on technology and marketing and online marketing and try to stay on top of the newest trends. But I also work a lot with clients and brokers from around the country, trying to understand the needs, the very unique needs of Latin America and how an MLS can fit into those needs. It's very much an adaptation of the MLS that you all know in North America.
And of course, looking at what we do here in the United States, of course, we take the MLS for granted. MLSs are not really very common in other countries, as we've learned in the numerous global business chats we've done over the last few years. So that's really a unique feature to Ecuador. Ashley, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself as well and what you specialize in, and also what the focus of the New York Times article was.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm originally from New York and spent most of my adult professional life in New York City and Los Angeles. I had nothing to do with real estate. I was an advertising and marketing executive and then a network television producer director. And so I came to Ecuador about 11 years ago, kind of looking for a new adventure, a new start, a reinvention, something that would be a little bit different than what I've been doing for 20 years. And so I did what Zach did in terms of due diligence. I went to Montevideo in Uruguay. I went to Panama and lived for a little bit. I went to Argentina and I came to Ecuador and I absolutely fell in love with it. I fell in love with the people probably the most. And then I fell in love with the country and Cuenca in specific terms because of the architecture, the colonial, cultural kinds of things that were happening, the art scene, the music scene. It just sort of fit me perfectly. And I lucked into an opportunity to help somebody sell a house. And I thought, well, this is kind of fun. I like this. I've always been a voyeur. I always like to see how other people live. I always like to, I'm very interested in interior design. So it really was a good fit. And people started asking me and it grew into a business and it grew into me being named the #1 real estate agent in Cuenca for 5 years running in our local Gringo newspaper. And so it just turned into something very special that I'm very grateful to be doing.
So tell us a little bit, when someone is looking to invest in Ecuador for whatever reason, they want to buy a second home or an investment property. Obviously, they're going to need a real estate professional. Most of the times, they're working with someone local in the U.S. who might connect them with someone in the country they want to do business in. A lot of times that happens through our CIPS network, through connections that we have through NAR. How does one go about looking for a real estate professional in Ecuador? Is there a realtor association? What's the process for that?
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I asked the New York Times reporter who contacted me the exact same question. How did you find me? Because I wasn't, I certainly have a website, but it's Ecuador at your service doesn't come right off the mouth and you don't necessarily think real estate. But he said, I Googled. And I think, in this century, everybody Googles real estate, the country, the name, whatever. And he said that, my website came up, it looked very legitimate. He liked the photographs. So people are very visual, I think. And if you have a website that's a visual website with a lot of information, I guess my writing background makes me a little more verbal than some other people. So I kind of tell a story about real estate. But I think Googling, there's tons of websites for Ecuador. Obviously the MLS now, and people that don't even understand what the MLS means in Ecuador understand MLS. So they go through that. But the search engines are wonderful for finding a variety of different people. And then you kind of decide on either somebody you think you might trust and or they have the properties, the kinds of properties that you want, or you go through all of them and see who you like if you end up contacting them or calling them and who calls you back.
Right. And so once we have a professional that we're comfortable working with, what's the first step in the property search? I mean, here, most people will, in the US these days, most people will start their search online before they even connect with a local real estate agent. How does it start in Ecuador?
Well, it's interesting because I have two kinds of clients. I've been doing this about 10 years now. I have the people that already live in Ecuador. I was kind of a pioneer. And so there was a bunch of expats when I first got here, primarily retirees looking for a quality of life in a beautiful country that wasn't going to cost them so much that they could even live on their pensions. The demographic, and I can talk about this later, but has changed dramatically in these 10 years. But I think that people are, they contact me, they usually contact me way before they're coming. I mean, we can be 6 months out. I've had people who say, I'm planning on retiring in 2025, and I really like some of your listings. And it's like, okay, call me back in 2025. But people are doing their search, doing their due diligence, and then contacting a real estate agent and saying, I'm coming in a certain date. These are the properties I'm interested in, or these are the qualities of things I'm looking for, city versus country, bedrooms and number of how many acres of land you might want, that kind of thing. And so I either pull together what they have requested and then pull out a few more that I think meet the criteria, or I just come together with their checklist and throw some ideas at them, and they say yes, no, and we create a relationship. So we do it via email, we do it via WhatsApp, and also on something like this.
Right. And this good segue over for Zach. Zach, maybe you could tell us how your MLS helps. How does your MLS work? Does it have a consumer facing side to it? Tell us a little bit about your MLS and how that's helping the industry in Ecuador.
Sure. So yeah, our MLS, we've building it from the ground up. We've really focused. It's national, so there is coverage across the most commonly visited and the common regions that people are looking in. So we have a core network of realtors across the country. So that would also be my answer for somebody who's looking or has a client that's maybe interested in some area. You could even contact me directly, and I could put you in contact with somebody who's working in that area. But we've really focused on a core network, trying to cover the majority of the common areas. And the listings that are on our platform is really only a fraction of what's out there, just due to the difference in the MLSs here, right? So how there's almost 100% of the listings on the MLS up there, it's very different down here, and it's a small fraction. So it's not the central database of all listings. I should make that very clear. Right.
And I would say that's also a very common scenario that we find in other countries, because MLSs are not typical, and usually they don't include the listings from all the various brokerage firms. So that's not very uncommon. But of course, having any MLS is useful. And I know you have a presentation that you want to share. Maybe you can show us what one of your listings looks like on your MLS and how it works.
Sure. Okay, so just starting at the beginning, I just made a real quick presentation on Ecuador in general. We already kind of went over my background. I've been here for 7 years in Ecuador. Some basic stuff. Spanish is the main language here, so it certainly helps to know Spanish. It's not required in some certain areas. One of the nice things is that we're on the US dollar. So that's a big advantage for a lot of people. It's easy transition. It's a small country, so about the size of Nevada, population about 17 million. But that means it's one of the beautiful things about Ecuador is you can travel across the country very easily and see all these different environments and ecosystems. And then the main ways of getting in and out, Quito and Guayaquil are still the main international airports, but recently Manta is now having some international connections. So that's a good growth for the coast. Manta is a small sized city on the coast that's really been growing with a lot of development recently. It's a big spot for expats to consider as well. You can go to the next slide. So here's the main choice between people, between what people decide when they want to move here is either the coast or the mountains. I put here the jungle because that's the Amazon basin is another major region of Ecuador. There are some people that choose to live there. For me, it's mostly a spot to go and have adventures and trips and explore it. So most people choose
Sold the place in
between.
the Amazon.
What's that?
I just sold the place in the Amazon, so there are people looking.
There are. I know expats that live there, and then there are people that choose it. The main choice for most people is living up in the mountains with a nice temperate climate, like here in Cuenca. It's a nice sized city as well, so there's cultural activities. Or Quito is a big metropolitan city, or plenty of small little mountain towns that are really picturesque. Or living on the coast, having the beach life, surf beach towns, or living in Manta, for instance, having a warmer climate. So those are the main. Sometimes people still have to figure that out when they want to look at Ecuador. That's the biggest decision to make, and it really is. The best thing about here is you can travel between the two areas very easily, but it is certainly a choice to make. You can go to the next slide. But really, some of the main benefits for me, at least personally, and not even talking about the real estate yet, just sort of living here. Their nature is everywhere. The beaches are beautiful. The mountains are beautiful. National parks, waterfalls, lakes, and everything you could want here. A lot of people, and me included, love all the produce, fresh ingredients, the abundance of fruits and vegetables that you get here, the tropical climate. So it really leads to a healthy lifestyle. And that's one thing I hear constantly. Like, I moved here, I dropped a lot of weight. I didn't even do anything specific, but it's the healthy eating lifestyle, more active lifestyle. Adventure, exploration, all the trips and side trips, weekend trips that you can take here, and you can get anywhere in the country really easily and quickly. The climate is obviously a big factor for people, the tropical climate, more on the coast or lower lands, and then just a nice temperate climate up in the mountains all year round. We're obviously right on the equator here. And the culture, that's a huge thing. It's warm, welcoming culture, diversity in culture. There's a lot of indigenous cultures as well. I think I read that there is something like 24 recognized languages here. So all the indigenous cultures. And then, of course, affordability is one of the main reasons. But I really encourage people to, you also want to just love Ecuador in general and all the different aspects, and not come here just because it's cheaper and easier on the wallet. But that's a huge plus of living here. You have all of the rest of all of those things that I mentioned. Plus, it's really affordable. Both real estate and just day-to-day life. Can go to the next slide. So in summary, I just summarize it with the phrase quality of life. Here you get just a different quality of life, much better quality of life than you can get in other places. And that's of course personal. And like I said, you have to fall in love with all of those different aspects, and it depends on each person. And the next. And then Ashley, I mean, you already kind of gave your bio, but here we also, she has her own website as well, ecuador@yourservice.com. And then Ashley, do you want to just talk about on the next slide, just talk about in general, sort of more the real estate aspects and some of the benefits of from that side of things, people considering Ecuador?
Sure, I can do it pretty quickly because I don't know exactly where you want to go later on in this, but can you get me the next slide so I know what I'm looking at, please? Thank you. Affordable prices. We did talk about that. And comparatively around the world and, compared to Europe, say, or certainly the United States or Canada, prices are very affordable for real estate. It's changing. It's getting more expensive here. Property values are going up. As I mentioned very briefly earlier, when I first started doing real estate, it was primarily retirees that were coming. I'm seeing a completely different demographic with lots of young families from not just North America, but Europe and Russia and Turkey and all kinds of different, cultures, which is going to make the city even more interesting. And also digital nomads. We have a special visa for digital nomads. So we're getting younger people that are coming for that purpose. And so prices are going up, construction costs are going up, but it's still super affordable.
So, and I want to just let everyone know that this particular PowerPoint presentation is going to be available on our website, so you'll all have access to it along with the recording of this program. And I'd like to get into the transaction itself. And if Zach, if you could briefly go through a couple of slides, just showing what we can find on your MLS and what it looks like from our standpoint when we're researching properties in Ecuador.
Sure. Do you mind sharing that presentation again and just going to I think it was 2 slides forward. But yeah, the MLS, so we do have a public facing website. This is what you see here. So kind of getting back into that, the MLS is a great place to network and find a core group of professionals across the country. You can do a search here. This is our main way of sort of getting the word out on the listings that come into the MLS, and the main way that individual people find our listings. So here's just a quick, simple screenshot of our homepage, and then on the next slide, we have what would be sort of like a search, and you start to see the results from there. Or we have specifically configured pages like this one for Cuenca or for coastal beach homes or something along those lines. And then on the next slide, we have here a screenshot of just one of the listings, just a quick summary view of the data, the property characteristics, the description, and then down below we do have sort of a table of the different features and different financial and legal information that they enter in, the infrastructure that's available on that property. Especially in Ecuador, there's a lot of rural properties that aren't yet connected to basic infrastructure. So that's an important thing to consider. So our MLS is more simplified, but yet it's still the most complete data source of property listings that there is available in Ecuador at the moment. So it's really great for people searching from abroad to be able to get the most information that they can on a listing.
I'd also like to jump in and just give kudos to this MLS, because for people like me, it really has helped to open up an international audience, because publications like Realtor.com International will pick up from the Ecuador MLS. And so I'll get inquiries from, somebody that I would not have had otherwise. It had not been for the MLS. So it's a very good vehicle for realtors.
And we do everything bilingual, so it is definitely targeted internationally, as Ashley says. In our association with NAR and Realtor.com gets those listings out to an international audience. But we do a lot of stuff in Spanish as well with our bilingual staff. Really also targeting the internal local market of transactions from locals to locals.
Right. So Ashley, tell us a little bit about the process itself. So let's say we found the property, we're ready to make an offer. What is the process for making an offer in Ecuador?
It's very simple and it's very loose. People, if they have found the property that they want, they call me. I call the client. They either accept or don't accept or counter the offer. And then we agree to agree. Sometimes it's in writing, not always. It's not required to put a bid in a written format. So like I say, very loose comparatively to the way that you would do real estate in the United States, for example. I work with lawyers. I would recommend that anybody buying property in a foreign country works with a lawyer because they know the laws, the changing rules, what's happening. So I introduce them to the lawyer. We go together. We talk about the different kinds of ways that they're going to purchase. Ecuador is a cash culture. You can't get mortgages unless it's an individual mortgage from the seller itself. And sometimes that's happened, but not very often. So it's a cash transaction. Whether you have the cash right away, or if you are going to put a down payment on it, a good faith down payment, that will change the way the process goes a little bit. If you're ready to buy, it takes 2 to 4 weeks. The lawyer will do all the due diligence. We'll make sure there's no liens, encumbrances, any 20 relatives that all own the same property and one doesn't want to sell. Those kinds of things that you would expect from any kind of legal representation. They draw up all the paperwork, and then it's just a matter of coordinating the timing of the payment and the person. And I've had clients in the U.S. who are buying property in Ecuador and aren't even here, give power of attorney to an attorney or a friend, and they can do the transaction without physically being here. In the reverse, I've had sellers be in the US and they designate someone to represent them here in Ecuador, and then the buyer and the lawyers get together, the power of attorney person. Everything has to be in Spanish. I always recommend that they ask the lawyers or a translator to translate before they sign anything, so they actually are aware of what they're signing. But you cannot have a legal transaction without it being in the native language. If you are going to have to sell your house, for example, and it might be 6 months down the line before you buy, then you will create something called a promissory note. And the promissory note is a promise to buy. It usually goes with a non-refundable deposit or an earnest money agreement, which ranges in between $5,000 and $10,000. Now, the only reason that would shift is the non-refundable part of it is if during the due diligence they found that there was a lien or there was something intrinsically wrong, or if during an inspection the roof was collapsing and the person decided not to go. So there's contingencies that are written into the paperwork ahead of time. But basically, those are the two ways that people purchase property, and you physically do not have to be here to purchase.
So basically, and that's a similar process that I think a lot of South American countries have, or even I think Spain and Portugal have something similar. I think what you refer to as the promise to buy, is it typical to execute a promise to buy first, or do people just jump right into a purchase agreement most of the time?
I'd say half and half, honestly, because there's a lot of people who are physically not here or aren't ready. Like I say, a lot of people have to get rid of one property in order to have the money to buy the second property. If you're here and you're ready, boom, 2 to 4 weeks, you're done. I will say there's a caveat, and it's a new one in rural properties. Rural properties now are required by law to have a GPS survey. That never happened in the past. It used to be that the boundaries were determined by where the cow liked to sit and where the tree put the shade on the other property. Now it has to be completely legitimately surveyed. And so that is taking longer. We're getting new people trained to do that because there hasn't been that many people doing that. as a consequence, most deeds are not adequate because they don't have the right numbers. And so in the municipality, it takes longer to do the paperwork. So in some cases, that can take more than a few months.
And is that cost, borne by the buyer or the seller to have that done?
It's the seller. The inspection, on the other hand, would be the buyer's choice. Some people decide they want to have something inspected. Some people feel that they are buying something new or that looks fine to them, and there's nothing that they feel they need to spend the money on to inspect.
And here in the US, I mean, we have different, different processes. For example, for going into contract, in some areas, there's a form contract that's approved by the local Realtor Association, for example, or in New York City, for example, every attorney will draw up their own contract. What is typical in Ecuador?
The lawyers will draw up the contract, but here the notary is king or queen. The notary is the most important person. They're equivalent to a judge in the United States. They have more education, and they're the people that have to go through the paperwork and make sure that absolutely everything that the lawyer has done has been done correctly, that the numbers match, that the statistics are the same, and that the people understand. Again, that's why you have to have a translation, or ideally have a translation, so you know what you're buying. But in the notary's office at the time of purchase, if you do not speak Spanish, you need to bring a translator. Sometimes it's a lawyer, but usually it's a third party, so that they can, the notary can, without a doubt, know that the person who is signing this understands what they're signing.
And who selects the notary and who pays for the notary?
The notary is paid for by the buyers. The buyer pays for all the closing costs here, with the exception of the commission for an agent like me and the capital gains. And to make it very simple, and this is just approximate, it's about 3% of the assessed value of the closing costs.
That's total closing costs, 3% as a rule of thumb?
Approximately, as a rule, yes.
Of the sales price.
And that
General.
includes the notary, that includes registration, that includes handing over the keys. A lot of lawyers will even go as far as changing the utilities over to people's names. It'll include the lawyer's fee and the transfer tax.
Got it. And you mentioned about doing your due diligence. You mentioned liens and encumbrances. In the US, we have title companies that do that. In Ecuador, I don't think title companies exist, right? So tell us a little bit about how that's done. How do we get a title search done, or what we call a title search?
Yeah, really, it's up to the legal team to go into the records and into the municipalities, into the history through the deed of the prior owner and who's the current owner and where the twain is meeting. I just did a deal where 3 and 4 brothers and sisters all were on the deed. And so we had to make sure that each party was in agreement to sell the property, and they all had to be at the closing, and they all had to sign a note prior to the closing that they were in agreement. So it's really up to the legal team to do that kind of due diligence.
So here in the US and even in the US, states vary. We've got quick claim deeds, we've got warranty deeds, bargain and sale deeds. Each of them have a different meaning and, have different consequences. Are there different types of deeds in Ecuador? How do we know we're getting a title that's really free and clear of any kinds of liens and encumbrances? It
really is because of what the lawyer has investigated. They're not different types of deeds. They almost, they each have different wording depending on, if furniture is included, or if it's going to be a month before somebody moves in, or if they want to keep something in a storage unit. I mean, there's all those little idiosyncrasies, but there's really only one kind of deed. And it is based on the hope that the lawyer that you choose is honest and reputable and knows his business, and that the notary double checks what the lawyer did so that we are all on the same page and that there aren't problems. So it's important that you pick reputable people and that's part of what my job is to steer people to the people I've worked with for the last 10 years who I know are the most honest and full of integrity and do the best, most comprehensive work.
Right. So we're going to jump into question and answer shortly. So if anybody has any questions that they would like us to ask of our guests, please put them in the Q&A. So we were talking about title searches. That's one thing. What about title insurance? Because we can do a title search and everybody can say, okay, looks like everything's free and clear of encumbrances, but title companies are made up of human beings who also make mistakes. If they make a mistake and there's title insurance, you're still covered, right? So what happens if the lawyer makes a mistake?
Yeah, thankfully that's never happened to me, but that could happen. There is title insurance here, but it's not a very popular thing. I don't know that I've had a client that's ever gotten title insurance. They get insurance on their property or they get insurance through the HOA on the building that they're involved in. But title insurance as it exists in the US is not something that most people do here. I will also say that Ecuador is not a litigious society. And so there's, if something happens, people try to work it out. And people try to be fair, but there's not, major lawsuits that people are going to win or lose. There are some, and there's certainly, in a case like that, there would be. But it's the society is so much about the common law as opposed to the judiciary system, and so it's just a little different.
And have you worked with, going back to the financing of the transaction, you said cash is king. Are there circumstances where financing is possible? Have you seen situations where people have financed the purchase of a property in Ecuador?
Again, if a seller is willing to finance owner financing, that has happened. And that usually happens between expat and expats, not Ecuadorians and expats. To be able to get funding here, financing, you have to live here at least 3 years. You have to have a certain amount of money in the bank, and you have to be scrutinized quite a lot to make sure that you are who you say you are, and that you do have the money, and that you are reputable and will be able to pay the money back. It's a rarity. Most people pay cash.
So you mentioned something about residency. Let's talk about that a little bit. Does buying a property in Ecuador transition to permission to get residency as we know it?
Yes. You can buy real estate and you have to have an assessed value of $49,500 in order to use that for your residency visa, but it can definitely be part of that. And a lot of people buy property just to get a residency visa and then Airbnb it out or something. So that has gone up since I've been working in real estate. It used to be 25,000 and now I think it's 49,500.
So a lot of people are always interested in buying in certain countries because of what's called a golden visa program, where they can get access to residency. I'm not sure that there is such a program in Ecuador. Is there one that you're aware of? So
No.
this basically is sort of automatic. You buy a property as long as it's valid at 49,000 and change, that will automatically lead to residency, or do you think does it take some time for you to get the residency?
Yes, it takes 2 years to get a resident visa here. And if you want a permanent visa, a permanent resident visa, during those 2 years, 21 months, I think it is, you have to be here. Help me, maybe, Zach, how many, 90 days? You cannot be gone more than 90 days. Is that correct?
I think that's the latest. It's always changing, so it's definitely always recommended to find somebody to help you out. But you basically have to choose Ecuador as your main residence, right? Where you're living most of the year here in Ecuador. You might be able to leave about 3 months out of the year.
Yeah. for for those 2 years, those 21
Mhm.
years. And then once you get your permanent visa, you can come and go as much as you please.
Great. And then in terms of, and I want to get into the question and answer in a minute or two, but tell us a little bit about the cost implications of owning a property in Ecuador, property taxes, any kind of taxes, basically. What are the tax consequences? And also, if someone does want to rent out a property, are they subject to income tax, capital gains tax, or anything like that?
There's good news and bad news about taxes. Property taxes here are unbelievably little. I have a 2,000 square foot loft smack in the middle of downtown. I'm over 65, which means that I am able to get a discount. You get discounts for being old here, which is about the only good thing about being old, but you do get discounts. You also get discounts when you're purchasing property if you're over 65 for the notary. You also get discounts if you're over 65 on capital gains. So it's kind of a good place to be growing older. But in terms of your question, property taxes are very low. For my 2,000 square foot loft, I pay 76 cents a year. And it's embarrassing to say that. The first time that happened, I actually took a picture and sent it all to my New York City friends, and they were like, what? In almost every instance, it's under $200. So property taxes are really inexpensive.
What's the bad?
On the other hand, the bad part is if you decide to move out of Ecuador, there is an exit tax. It used to be 5%. Our new president Lasso has wanted to change that because of the economy of not bringing in people and bringing in business because of that penalty. And so starting in March of this year, I believe, we're now at 4.5, and each year he's going to lower it a little bit. Logistically, they can't just take it away, but they are lowering it in increments as we go along. So hopefully that'll make a big difference.
So in New York, we have something similar when we deal with co-op sales, something called a flip tax. But typically, the flip tax is a tax on the profit. So is this a tax on the profit, or is it a tax on the entire amount of the sales price?
It's a tax on any money you take out of Ecuador.
Got it. Okay.
Even if you didn't buy a house, and even if you didn't, if just for example, if I as a realtor, have a checking account here and I have X amount of dollars in there, if I wanted to leave, I'd be taxed on that if I took it to the US.
Got it. And one more question before we go on to the question and answers. If someone wanted to rent out their property, whether to a long-term tenant or Airbnb, short-term rental, any restrictions, regulations that you're aware of, or that buyers should inquire about?
I think it's always important for a buyer to ask if the building that they are buying a condo in, Airbnbs, different buildings have different rules. Usually it's that you cannot rent out less than 2 weeks. Some of them is a month, because the permanent residents don't want to be living in a revolving door hotel. So that each HOA makes their own decisions about the building. So it's important, if you're coming purely for an investment purpose, that you find out what that particular building is. Airbnb is super popular here. Lots of people do it. There are some rules on the books, but they're not really enforced, that you are supposed to register and pay some taxes. Again, very few people do it, but if you want to, feel confident and comfortable and legitimate, it's something that you should do. You should get a little bit of a license. It's basically being pushed by the hotel association, who feel that especially night renting by the night is competing with hotel rooms, and they're paying their taxes, and they feel it's only fair that Airbnb owners pay taxes as well.
Great. So I want to go through some of the questions that we have. Zach, we'll start with you and the MLS. So One of our viewers was born in Ecuador and is a realtor here in the US. Do you have to be a member of your MLS in order to have access to their listings? Is there a difference between the consumer facing website and the information we get from the broker side?
So there is a difference. We do have more information for actual MLS members when they log into our MLS. There's a bit more of the financial information. Obviously, what's the commission offered on the property? What's the commission being split for the buyer's agent? That's not on the consumer-facing portal. For most purposes, though, the consumer-facing portal should, be enough for somebody who's interested in connecting and networking and trying to work out a referral agreement with somebody with a listing or another broker that's on the MLS. As an MLS, we're very interested in networking and expanding our network and working with associations like yourselves. So also, I'm very happy to help, just facilitate any communication or anything that can help a referral type agreement, so that we can just have a more fluid back and forth. But yeah, I think just searching on the MLS through that website that I showed is really probably the best way to start.
Great.
If I may just add one thing, Zach,
Mhm.
for realtors, you pay to be part of the MLS. For the general public, it's free just to browse and look and be a part of it. So it is an association of sorts because we do pay annual fees.
So Zach, there is a fee, for example, to become a member of your MLS, correct?
Exactly. Yep.
And are you required to be a part of any association in order to have access, or is it like more of a broker owned or privately owned MLS?
So it is a privately owned MLS. And no, you're not required to be part of a specific association.
And we have another question about a requirement for being licensed to sell real estate in Ecuador. So I'm aware there is a certain licensing requirement in Ecuador, but it's not really the same as we have here in the States, for example. Maybe if you could
Right.
talk a bit about that, Zach or Ashley.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting aspect here in Ecuador. There is technically a law in the books that you have to be licensed for real estate transactions. It's been there since the early 80s. So it's really, really an old law. Unfortunately, though, in practice, it's not enforced. And so therefore, don't make any assumptions. And that's just the current state that we're in. So in practice, it's almost as if there isn't a licensing law just based on who's practicing real estate. Now, I do know the associations are, and we're following this closely, are trying hard to make some changes, make some legal changes, and add some enforcement. And so we hope to start seeing some changes in the next few years. But it's an uphill battle, that's for sure.
Right now, assuming you do get licensed, and you mentioned enforcement, are there educational requirements, classes that have to be taken in order to get the license, or is it basically more like a registration?
No, there are classes, and I don't. It's actually I don't know how many weeks they are, but it requires. That's one of the hurdles, is because it actually requires a lot of time. Luckily now, since the pandemic, they're starting to offer virtual classes, so that's a big improvement for people that weren't living right next to where one of the associations are. And here we do have, I should mention, we have provincial associations. So each province has their own association. And then there's an overarching national association. But it's a little bit, each one has their own way of doing things. And classes are fairly expensive. And that's also one of the problems, I think, in people getting licensed, is it can run close to $3,000 to take classes, and fairly large time commitment for the education.
And they only
side.
do it a couple times a year. So yeah, it's not an ongoing program.
So yeah, we're trying to work with the associations to also
Classes
facilitate that.
Those classes are required for the license, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And one of our viewers asked a question about access to medical services. We recently did a trade mission to Portugal, and one of the wonderful things was the access to the medical services in Portugal that attracted a lot of foreign investors and buyers. I understand Ecuador also has fairly easy and affordable access to medical care.
I can talk to that
Yeah,
because I've used the medical care. I had a very serious, almost life-threatening problem that required 8 surgeries. And I happened to have international insurance, but after that, I decided to get what is called IESS, which is the equivalent of the Social Security kind of Medicare that we have in the United States. And it's for a single woman, it's $70 a month, and it covers absolutely everything. I have a friend who had stage 4 cancer. She was covered 100%, including alternative medicines. And I think lots of the doctors here are trained in the US and Canada and Brazil. Most of them, not most of them, many of them speak English. I cannot say enough good about the healthcare in Ecuador. You can WhatsApp your doctor, and if he's not in surgery, will get back to you within an hour or two. They come to your house sometimes, and I think I have wonderful things to say about the healthcare here. I would get recommendations from people that are here, but I definitely have thumbs up for that.
Wonderful. And another question we had is, what is typically the referral fee? What percentage usually gets paid out as a referral fee to a referring agent from anywhere around the world? For example, they refer somebody to you from another country.
It varies. If somebody brings me a client and there's a sale, I split my commission. I mean, they brought the client, I had the property, we worked together, boom. If it's just and they really worked it with the client. If it's just somebody like the taxi driver who said, I took somebody and they want to buy a property, here's their name, I will give a referral fee, and that usually is 10%. Something's, it's not significant, but something that at least it's an incentive for people to want to help. But if I work with a lot of Ecuadorian real estate agents, and we split commissions straight down the middle.
So fairly similar to the US, there's no set fee, it's negotiable.
Yeah.
And we have someone else who has a question. Maybe they're interested in starting a career in real estate in Ecuador. What would be the process if they did want to get their license in Ecuador? Can you start working right away? How long does it take to get the license?
Zach, do you want to answer that?
Sure. So yeah, the process would be, first of all, contacting one of the specific associations. Really, actually, I'll just plug ourselves real quick. Over the next 2 months, we're really trying to compile all this information so that we also have all of the information across the country, so that people don't have to go to each individual association asking when's the next course, what price are you charging, what's your requirements, are you doing it virtual or not. So we don't currently have that information at our fingertips, but we're basically going to be doing the groundwork to keep that information up to date. So really, I would encourage you to just, we can stay in contact, and I can help with that. Because it's really going to depend on each association. And again, looking for something that's virtual, basically. All classes are in Spanish now. There are no classes offered in English. So that would be one of the main requirements is knowing Spanish.
Great, super. And I think we've just run out of time. I want to thank both of you for joining us today. I want to thank everybody for joining us on this global business chat today. And I think everybody learned something, and I want everybody to know that we will be posting a recording of this global business chat on our website. We'll also be posting the PowerPoint presentation that Zach prepared. Also, I believe, Zach, you're going to be going to the NAR convention in Orlando. Is that correct? In November?
Yes, that's my plan, is going to the NAR convention in Orlando. There's also a Congreso Inmobiliario, a convention in Costa Rica happening in September 22nd and 23rd that I'll be going to. I know somebody asked about Latin American conventions, so there's another one that's going to be pretty big as well.
Great. And I think when you're in NAR, just we'll keep in touch because we'd love to meet with you and hopefully anybody else that's going to the convention who's on this chat right now can join us as well. And I just want to, before closing, I just want to mention a few things that a few events that you might be interested in. So we're going to be having the NAR will be hosting its C5 Commercial Summit this coming August, actually, 2 weeks. That'll be from the 15th to the 17th of August. I know Teresa Mueller, you're on this chat with us today. I'm pretty sure you're going to be there. We will be hosting a CIPS networking event on Tuesday, August 16th. So if you're going to be in New York City in Times Square for C5, please visit our website or leave me a message on the chat box here, and we'll give you the time and information of where we're going to be meeting for that on Tuesday. Also, FIAPSI is going to be hosting its investment forum and trade mission here in New York City. HGAR is a principal member of FIAPSI, and we're very proud to be sponsoring that event and assisting FIAPSI with some logistics and organization. So if you're interested in more information about that, please let us know in the chat box. Also, please, if you're interested in more global real estate information, try to join us on October 20th for our 15th annual Global Real Estate Summit. That's going to be happening at the Marriott Marquis Hotel in Times Square, Manhattan. If you're interested in attending or sponsoring or volunteering at the event, or if your realtor association might be interested in collaborating with this event, please let us know as soon as possible. This year, the summit is going to be co-sponsored by 7 regional realtor associations in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And we're always looking to expand that. After all, it is a global event. Also, don't forget the annual real estate conference in Orlando, the best place to be for global. I can't stress it enough. The CIPS networking opportunities and the global meetings and events are really something you don't want to miss. HGAR, our association, will also be meeting with our Portugal Global Ambassador and Cooperating Association partners. They're going to be in attendance, and we're going to be hosting them. So we hope that you can join us for that. And one more plug, not too long ago, last year, we had a global business chat with the Ghana Real Estate Professionals Association, Ghana Real Estate Professional Realtors Association. And we're happy to inform you that they're actually hosting their own real estate summit. It's going to be happening in Ghana in September. If you can't make it in person, they will have a virtual option. So please let us know if you want more information about that as well. So those are the plugs I have, and I hope you join us next time. It'll be in about 2 months where we'll have our next global business chat. So Zach and Ashley, thank you so much for joining us.
It was our
Thank you
pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Tony. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. And we'll look for you in Orlando.
Okay.
I'll see
Very
you in
good.
New York in December.